In addition to our big routers, the ones that have a lot of horsepower and have the big bases, we have these handy little routers, often referred to as trim routers or laminate routers. They were originally designed to be a router for trimming laminates. When you had plastic laminate where one piece overhung the other, you'd use a flush trim bit on there, and these handy little routers would allow you to zip around that corner and get everything trimmed very flush. But they turned out to be a very handy router for the wood shop. They're great for doing little roundovers, for doing inlay work, for doing lots of small work where you don't want the bulk of a big router and you don't need the horsepower of a big router. These are 1 horsepower routers. They do have variable speed, so you can vary your motor speed for the bit that you have. And they are just handy. They're just really nice to be able to grab with one hand and work. The biggest drawback to these trim routers is this fixed base. It's all right if you're just doing roundover work, but if you want to do some real work with a router, things like mortises, inlays, you need something a lot more sophisticated than just a fixed base. That's where a plunge base comes in handy. Bosch recently came out with a plunge base for their little Colt, and their aftermarket bases like this microfence base. This microfence, actually, you can put a small light on it so that you can highlight your area when you're working with really fussy joinery. So their small size and these accurate bases really complements what you're doing in your shop. They're handy, they're lightweight, they're relatively inexpensive, and they're probably about as versatile a router as you'll have in your shop. Now for something really unique, we've got micro routers. Very low horsepower, high RPM, but very small for doing real detail work. This is a Proxon router. It's a plunge router. You can plunge it into the work, lock it in place. Does a very nice job. These have small 1/8" collets on them that take the real tiny bits so you can do very, very fussy work. The nice thing about a small router like this is its lack of mass. It's very easy to move these routers around so you can do very precise work. This is essentially a Dremel moto tool, and the Dremel screws into this microfence base, and this base is a full-featured plunge base. It has your turrets for the different depth stops so that you can very easily gauge your depth and work up to a finished depth that you want. The plunge works very nicely and locks in place, so you have a lot of control over what you're doing. Now, I like doing inlay work, and one of the things about inlay work is you really have to see where your cutter is. You really have to be aware of that line. This microfence is open on one side, so you can look right into the area that you're cutting. Then you can add a light to it, so you light up the exact area you're cutting. And you really can't find much better of a tool for doing inlay work, because that lack of inertia, that light tool, makes it real easy to change direction. So you can get real close to a line and work that line very, very carefully. And with the open sight line, you can see exactly where you're working. And one of the benefits of this Dremel is that you have a cordless router. There's nothing more frustrating than working with real fine detail. You're down there really working on it, getting very, very close to where you want to be, and that cord hangs up on the edge of your table. And then you have a source for creativity because you've got an oops that you have to patch. But these are really accurate small tools for doing very delicate work.